addicts are in the 10 to 20th percentile, right? And we talk about cigarettes. Now, cigarettes, how many of you guys heard the news recently about big tobacco? So big tobacco finally lost an 11-year lawsuit, which now they have to, big tobacco actually has to pay for ads that talk about how tobacco kills you. And unfortunately, they're putting it on TV, and nobody watches TV anymore, so they kind of did that on purpose, I feel. But even tobacco, typically only, and it swells and it grows, but only affects 30 to 40% of the population. Now, what if I told you that there was something that 80% of the United States population is addicted to? Chick-fil-A. I said the United States, not the Schrift family. All right? 80%. Would you believe that 80% of Americans are classified as being addicted or near addiction state to screens? 80%. Screens. And you're saying, Mike, screens? It's not an addiction. All right, we'll talk about that. 1997, we said, don't sit too close to the TV, it'll damage your eyes. And in 2017, we put the TV right up on our eyes, so close that our eyelashes can touch it. Thank you, Nate Horn, for sharing that with me. And if you're wondering what are the signs of addiction? We're going to go through that. All right, so the signs of addiction, number one is cravings. How many of you guys sometimes want to pick up your phone and take a look at it, right? You don't have to raise your hand. All right, this is Screens Anonymous. All right? How many of you feel sometimes there's a dependence on your phone? And here's how you can tell. If you leave home without it, you feel you have to go back. How many of you guys, if I gave you an address, you could find it without your phone? Right? It would depend. There you go. All right? Tolerance. How many of you guys, maybe 5 years ago, you would spend maybe 5 minutes, you would say you spend significantly less time on your phones 5 years ago than you do today? Right? Absolutely. Withdrawal symptoms. How many of you guys have gone into a no signal zone? And you keep checking, where's that signal? Come on. All right. How about poor judgment? Right? Poor judgment. You don't think you're addicted. You tell people you don't need your phone, and you begin to make judgments. You begin to make decisions based on that denial. So you say, no, I'm not addicted to my phone, and then you decide to use your phone for everything at that point. I'm not addicted to my phone. I just need it for the Bible. All right. So when I asked you guys to read Titus 1:8, guess how many people whipped out a Bible? I had one. I saw. Okay, so two. I saw Elizabeth. Brian doesn't count. Didn't see you. Saw your Chick-fil-A back there. All right. So it's funny because a lot of people, and I would have done it myself. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people whipped out their cell phones. All right. How about excessive seeking? What do you think is the average time the average adult checks their phone in any given day? 50. No, just pulls their phone up. Quantity. Pulls up their phone to take a look at it. It's 150. 150, the average, which means half of America does more than 150. Half of America does more than 150. 150 is just the average. All right? And then the average American spends 5 hours with their screen on, not related to work, and not related to work. They spend 5 hours looking at a screen. Not related to work. Think about that. Financial trouble. So this was a fun one talking about at the home education conference. How many of you guys consider yourself rich? How many of you guys have a smartphone? You can raise your hand for this. Smartphone. All right. How much does your cell phone cost? Don't give me that per monthly rate or the zero down. You've got a $500 to $1,000 device sitting in your pocket. Most days I have two because my work decided to give me one as well. All right. How many of you guys would be willing to upgrade to the next one as soon as you feel like you're comfortable? As soon as your 2 years are up, you want to upgrade to the next one, right? And maybe you don't. That's all right. Neglect responsibilities. How many of you guys have ever been late to something because of your cell phone? Never, right? That doesn't happen. I don't sit there browsing Facebook and suddenly realize I've been on the toilet for 45 minutes. That never happens. See, you're laughing because it's happened to you. Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead. Keep telling yourself that. Those of you with kids, I can guarantee you've locked yourself in the restroom and read some devotions on your cell phone. Develop unhealthy friends. How many of you guys have social media? Show of hands. All right. How many of you have talked to everybody on your Facebook friends list, your Instagram friends list, your Twitter followers? How many of you talked physically with them at least once in the past month, with all of them? I don't know if I could call them friends. All right? How about isolation? You begin to realize your addiction. You actually acknowledge your addiction, and you begin to grow ashamed of it. And as such, you start to use your cell phone in places where you're not going to be seen. Or you go on a cell phone or social media fast. How many of you guys have done that? A social media fast. You said, you know what, I'm going to stay off of Facebook for a week. Praise the Lord. All right. Did you know that fasting all throughout the Bible is when you deny something that you need, like food or water, that you need? So if we're fasting social media, which I've done, this is not me versus you. All right. What are we telling ourselves if we have to fast social media? How many of you guys have been fasting heroin for the past week? Right? Okay, thank you. Right? None of us would be like shooting up and saying, oh, well, I'm going to fast heroin for the next week. I want to get closer to God. All right? So these signs of addiction are taken from rehab.com, and these are all signs of addiction, actually, to heroin. And we were able to easily compare each one of these addiction signs to your phone or your mobile device or whatever, a screen. And believe it or not, you only need 4 of those symptoms to be registered as an addict. 4 of those symptoms to be registered as an addict. You see, your life on screens has a dramatic effect, and it does even more so on children. Brain damage has been evidenced in people who grow too addicted to screens. They lose the ability to have cognitive function. You lose the ability to begin to logic. You begin to forget things. How many of you guys can remember your phone number from when you were a kid? All right, how many of you guys can give me 5 phone numbers from people that you know today that you call on a regular basis? 5? All right, 10. Right? If I got hit by a car tomorrow and I had to crawl out of the car, I could call my mom, I could call my wife, I could call my in-laws' house, and I could call A&M Pizza in Manheim, Pennsylvania. Right? If I needed Brother Dave, oh man, right? But you see, the brain damage isn't just based on, like, you think, oh, it's attacking my brain. No, it actually, you begin to forget things, and you begin to no longer develop that muscle that teaches you memory. You see, it's why a lot of times when we rely on video screens to teach, it's actually a lazy form of learning, because reading forces you to exercise your brain. When you're watching something on a screen, it simply puts it in there, and your brain doesn't develop a muscle. Right? Just like if I wanted to be a champion arm wrestler, I couldn't watch videos of arm wrestling because it wouldn't do nothing for my muscle. The same thing affects your memory. You're not going to remember things if you consistently try to learn them from TV. All right? Obesity. Primarily, being stuck on a screen means you're not outside exercising, right? That's kind of fairly obvious. All right? Sleep deprivation issues. The blue light emitted by your cell phone causes your brain to go active. It causes it to think that something is happening. It's natural, because when human beings, throughout time, when we wake up, the sky lights up and it's blue. It tells your brain it's time to wake up. You shoot that in your eyes at night before you go to bed, you're going to have sleep deprivation issues. The list goes on: behavioral problems, social failure, violence, and vision problems. Vision problems is interesting. We talked about this in our home education conference. Would you believe that 7-year-old kids are now exhibiting signs of macular degeneration that 40 to 45-year-old people who work in an office typically exhibit? And you might say, okay, all right, you got me, I'm addicted. But we're talking physical here, right? We're talking about physical problems. What does this have to do with holiness? And holiness should be more about that, right? Well, I want you guys to understand addictions first. And so I've got a video I'd like for you to watch. And yes, it's the same video from last week. I apologize.
That engagement with social media and our cell phones releases a chemical called dopamine. That's why when you get a text, it feels good. right? So, we've all had it where you're feeling a little bit down or feeling a bit lonely. And so you send out 10 texts to 10 friends, hi, 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 hi. Because it feels good when you get a response, right? Right? It's why we count the likes. It's why we go back 10 times to see if my Instagram is growing slower. Did I do something wrong? Do they not like me anymore, right? The trauma for young kids to be unfriended, right? Because we know when you get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It's why we like it. It's why we keep going back to it. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive, right? We have age restrictions on smoking, gambling, and alcohol, and we have no age restrictions on social media and cell phones, which is the equivalent of opening up the liquor cabinet and saying to our teenagers, hey, by the way, this adolescence thing, if it gets you down. But that's basically what's happening. That's basically what's happening, right? That's basically what happened. You have an entire generation that has access to an addictive, numbing chemical called dopamine through social media and cell phones as they're going through the high stress of adolescence. Why is this important? Almost every alcoholic discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. When we're very, very young, the only approval we need is the approval of our parents. And as we go through adolescence, we make this transition where we now need the approval of our peers. Very frustrating for our parents, very important for us. It allows us to acculturate outside of our immediate families into the broader tribe, right? It's a highly, highly stressful and anxious period of our lives, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends. Some people, quite by accident, discover alcohol and numbing effects of dopamine to help them cope with the stresses and anxieties of adolescence. Unfortunately, that becomes hardwired in their brains, and for the rest of their lives, when they suffer significant stress, they will not turn to a person, they will turn to the bottle. Social stress, financial stress, career stress, that's pretty much the primary reasons why an alcoholic drinks, right? What's happening is because we're allowing unfettered access to these dopamine-producing devices and media, basically it's becoming hardwired, and what we're seeing is as they grow older, too many kids don't know how to form deep, meaningful relationships. Their words, not mine. They will admit that many of their friendships are superficial. They will admit that their friends, that they don't count on their friends, they don't rely on their friends, they have fun with their friends, but they also know that their friends will cancel on them as something better comes along. Deep, meaningful relationships are not there because they never practice the skill set, and worse, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to social media, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. We know, the science is clear, we know that people who spend more time on Facebook suffer higher rates of depression than people who spend less time on Facebook, right? These things balanced. Alcohol is not bad, too much alcohol is bad. Gambling is fun, too much gambling is dangerous, right? There's nothing wrong with social media and cell phones. It's the imbalance.
He's not
right? If you're sitting at dinner with your friends and you're texting somebody who's not there, that's a problem. That's an addiction. If you're sitting in a meeting with people you're supposed to be listening to and speaking, and you put your phone on the table, face up or face down, I don't care, that sends a subconscious message to the room that you're just not that important to me right now, right? That's what happens. And the fact that you cannot put it away is because you are addicted, right? If you wake up and you check your phone before you say good morning to your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse, you have an addiction. And like all addiction, in time, it'll destroy relationships, it'll cost time, and it'll cost money, and it'll make your life worse.
You see, Simon Sinek here, who's not a Christian, please don't go out and gamble and say, Brother Mike said it was okay. Simon Sinek here is bringing up a very important point, and that is the addiction that you have to your cell phone or to a screen, maybe you don't, maybe you do, is actually replacing relationships in your life. And you see, it's been common knowledge throughout the late 1900s, starting in roughly the early 1900s, probably 1915 or so. The medical community decided that drugs cause a chemical dependency. So they took two rats, and some of you have heard this before, but they took rats and they stuck them in a cage, and they put a water bottle on one side and another water bottle on the other. They laced one with cocaine, and they found that in every instance, as the rat began to drink the cocaine-laced water, he began more and more to grow addicted to it, until he would drink it at the expense of not drinking the other water until he would die. And as time went on, people began to believe that this heroin or this cocaine, that it's all a chemical addiction, that once your body gets used to it, you can't pull yourself off of it. But then different things begin to happen. Some of those things I talked about. Vietnam soldiers were coming back after taking heroin for full 15 months out in the jungle, and they come back to America and instantly become clean again. They would find out, they saw the children of the 90s who were on cocaine. They saw the children who grew up on marijuana, who grew up on marijuana through high school. Population after population would be massively on drugs, but typically over 90% of them would be able to quit the drugs fairly easily without any kind of chemical altering of their brain, without any kind of rehab. And a man in the 1970s by the name of Dr. Alexander conducted another experiment as he looked at those two rats. And he took these two rats and he said, what if I add a little bit more? He took these rats and he said, what if I add a little bit more? So he put 2 water bottles in the cages, once again water and cocaine, but then he filled the cage with tons of rat toys and rat motels, not the kind that kill them. And he put toys and stuff for them to do, and he put other rats in there, and they began to interact with each other and have a good time with each other. And he found out that those rats consumed only 25% of the cocaine water compared to the other rats that were in the first experiment. And then he took the experiment a little further. He took rats and he got them addicted to cocaine on purpose. He put them in a cage with nothing but cocaine water, put them on cocaine water for 55 days, and then he put them into, the rat version of Cancun. And the majority of the rats were able to become clean of their addiction to cocaine. They started drinking the regular water. And what he concluded, and what is starting to begin to be proved more and more by modern science, is that addictions are not chemical-based. Addictions are relationship-based. Addictions are a relationship dependency. You see, addictions as relationship dependencies, they do so, like Simon was talking about, because they begin to replace things in your life with people. You see, those Vietnam soldiers who came back and were able to break free of the addiction, they did so because they came back into the loving arms of their family and people who cared about them. Those who became to grow addicted were typically the ones who also found themselves homeless, rejected by family, loners. Their addiction stayed with them. And as we look at the addiction of screens, we have to ask ourselves, what are we getting from this dopamine addiction that we have to looking at screens, to checking our cell phones all the time? Is that beginning to replace things in our lives, like relationships where we meet face-to-face with people, where we eat dinner with people, or we call someone up on the phone just to chat with them? Is that relationship with that screen beginning to interfere with different things in our lives, like, God? Exodus 23 tells us quite frankly, it says, you shall have no other gods before us. And you might say, yeah, but Brother Mike, he was talking about Baal, he was talking about, Ra and the Egyptian gods. But if you have an addiction to your screens and it's replacing relationships, can you look at your relationship with God and say that it's the same as with your screen? Do you talk to God 150 times a day? Do you spend 5 hours outside of work referring to God? Found this cool little meme. It says, what if we treat our Bibles the way we treat our cell phones? And for most of us now, our Bible is our cell phone, and vice versa. But carried it everywhere with us, turned back to it if we forgot it, checked it for messages throughout the day, used it in case of an emergency, spent an hour or more using it each day. Tell me, honestly, self-examine yourself right now and ask yourself, is your screen substituting itself as a relationship with God? When we talk about holiness, we talked earlier 2 weeks ago about holiness being something that sets us apart and something that identifies us as belonging to God. And I submit to you today that if you could list at least 4 of those things on that addiction profile, that you might want to start thinking about whether or not your screen is beginning to replace your relationship with God. And if it's not, what relationship is it replacing? Is it replacing your relationship with your spouse? Is it replacing your relationship with your kids? Are you using it to replace your kids' relationship with you? When we used to live in Hawaii, the first thing that we turned to for a babysitter was Elmo. And we would just give it to Micah and we'd put it in front of him. And I firmly believe that my decision to do that affected how Micah grew and how he developed. He's whip smart, all right? But when we begin to replace that relationship, that affects my ability to bond with my son. And when you begin to replace that relationship with your brother, your sister in Christ, as Wes talked about, unity becomes something that's a lot harder to do. None of you guys would disagree with me if I said everybody here gets toasted or lit up, or we all have drug addictions and heroin addictions, and we all drink till we're blackout drunk every Friday, Saturday night. You would say, yeah, that's why the church struggles to come together in unity, right? No one would question that. But think for a second whether or not we could be more united if we took the time to prioritize each other and less time to prioritize social media, to prioritize our life. You see, God saw loneliness as being solved by relationships with others, right? He took a look at Adam and he said, it's not good that man should be alone. I will make him an app comparable to him. Oh, no, that's not what it says. Sorry. It says, it is not good that man should be alone. I will develop a fun, inspirational quote that he can post on Facebook in order to be comparable to him. Nope, he said, it's not good to be alone. I'm going to make a helper for him. I'm going to make another person for him. God saw loneliness as being solved by relationships with others. But when we allow these devices to supplant those relationships, then we build a dependency on them, and we become actually more alone in our own lives. And you might say, well, that's not us. Well, is that you? Do you find yourself doing this in the presence of someone else, or at any time in your lives? Have you allowed your device to replace the very bonds of intimacy, friendship, and human connection that we all share with each other? And do we find ways to justify our foolish behavior? Wes and Tara, do you guys love each other? Wes, did you go away for work today, or were you working from home? You were working from home, all right. Did you guys have time to talk about a lot today, or were you working most of the day? A little bit? Is anybody who worked away from their spouse today? All right, Brian, where's Michelle? She's not here. Oh, there's Michelle. Would you mind going up to Michelle and talking to her about your day, just for example's sake? Talk to Michelle about your day. Michelle, I want you to talk to you about your day to Brian. Hey, Brian. Was that rude of me? Was that rude of Brian? Was that rude of Brian? Yeah? All right, go ahead and keep talking about your day. Hey, are you going to make that meeting tonight at 7? Yeah, you're going to make that meeting tonight at 7. Oh, okay. Sorry, was I being rude? All right. Go ahead. Thank you, Brian. Who knows what the point is that I'm getting at? If I texted Brian and he's in the middle, and not saying Brian would, but how many of us do that, right? We're in the middle of a conversation with someone. Oh, hold on a second. I've got to talk to someone who's 14 miles away, even though you're standing right next to me. Right? Is that what we've begun to now? You're literally there and you're in a physical presence of someone. You're actually connected to them. But you'd rather text someone who's on the other side of wherever for whatever reason. Right? We would find it rude if we do that in person, but yet our addictions are leading us down these darker roads. And perhaps you say you're not addicted. Perhaps you don't think that you have an addiction. Well, I would still warn you about the dangers of becoming addicted to screens. See, the primary reason that we use screens is obviously to access the internet. And once again, it starts with something as small as using apps and Facebook and social media. But the internet has a much darker side to it. I am talking about the pornography industry, of course. And the world of pornography is one of those darker roads. I want to read to you guys some stats about the pornography industry that you probably heard before, but maybe you haven't. Do you realize that porn sites receive more regular traffic than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined each month? 35%, over 1/3 of all internet downloads are now pornography related. 34%, 1 out of every 3 internet users has been accidentally exposed to unwanted porn via ad, pop-ups, or viruses. People who admitted to having extramarital affairs were over 300% more likely to admit to consuming porn than those who had never had an affair. At least 30% of all data just transferred across the internet is porn related. 624,000 plus child pornography traders have been discovered online in the United States alone, and it's not even the most populated country. Between 2005 and 2009, pornography was hosted on servers located in all 50 states. It is a global $97 billion industry with about $12 billion of that coming from the US alone. In 2016 alone, more than 4 trillion 599 million hours of porn were consumed on the world's largest porn site. Just one site. One site. The most popular porn site in the world ranks at number 18 of websites visited. It outranks eBay, that outranks MSN, and it outranks Netflix. And if you think it only affects boys, teenage girls and young women are now more significantly likely to actively seek out porn than ever before. Approximately 64% of young girls ages 13 to 24 now seek out pornography. And a study of 14 to 19-year-olds found that females who consume pornographic videos were at a significantly greater likelihood of being victims of sexual harassment or sexual assault. And I hate to bring up such a dark subject, but I want you guys to understand. Just like I'm not going to go out tomorrow and decide to rob a bank while lit up on cocaine and, I don't know, however you take meth, all right? Someone doesn't just jump on and say, I'm going to start looking at porn. Someone doesn't just say, I'm going to start sexually assaulting that person. Someone doesn't just say, I'm going to just go have extramarital affairs. It starts right here. It used to start in a magazine. It used to start on a computer, a big bulky thing. But now every single person who has access to a small cell phone that's 5 inches wide has the ability to do it. And listen, I know that we talk about filters and we talk about content filters and we talk about making sure that we protect ourselves. I know we have things like Covenant Eyes and there's different things that you can do out there. But I'm telling you, he was then 6-year-old son one day managed to, I'm sitting there in the living room and pictures, good pictures, of our family started to flash on the TV screen. And I had no idea how he did it. And I'm a millennial. But my son managed to stream pictures from my wife's phone at the age of 6 onto the TV. They interviewed these young kids who admitted to looking at pornography at the age of 12, and they asked them, they said, how are you able to do that at the school when it has a government-level filter on it? And the kids in the interview laughed at, and I forget, it was on CNN. I mean, they're sitting in this room, and they're being very serious, and they laughed, and they said, are you kidding me? We can get through anything. You just Google it. You see, you might think that you're preventing someone from being an alcoholic by taking alcohol out of the house. But that's not addressing the addiction issue. And just like you might think you might prevent someone from looking at pornography by putting on a filter or something along those lines, you're still not addressing the addiction issue. Addiction is very real, and it leads to roads like this in 1 out of 3 people on the internet. It interferes in our relationships with others as brothers and sisters in Christ, and interferes in our relationship with God. And it is not holy. But there is a solution. I'm not all negative today. Can anyone tell me what the first step is in overcoming an addiction? Okay, I couldn't hear, everybody said it, right? So admit it that you have a problem. Not only that, but I would challenge you to acknowledge that your problem is a dangerous spiritual one. You see, just like in Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is we admitted we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. If your device is managing your life, then your life has become unmanageable. This is a dangerous area to be treading water as we grow addicted to our cell phones every day. Pornography obviously replaces and displaces relationship, but so does excessive social media. So does texting. So does playing video games. So does crawling through Pinterest and Instagram 4 hours a day to find cute projects that you're probably never going to do, but you want to save because you're probably going to do them sometime, right? Or saving every meme that you find on social media because you want to share it with everybody and you think it's going to get them to laugh and say ha ha on your text message. So does finding those spiritual, inspirational sayings. And you say, well, I use my Instagram as a method of ministry, right? Because you think everybody who reads that quote that says, when you're going through difficulty and wonder where God is, remember it's always quiet during the test. Oh, thank you. You just really spoke to me through an image that you posted from your house 14 miles away when I was going through trouble. And you know what? I don't want to downplay that. Yeah, you might feel something. But let me ask you this. What would you rather have if you're going through a difficult time? I throw an inspirational quote in front of you, or I give you a call and I talk to you? Right? The relationship is what is important in the body. Just like Wes was talking about. You don't take your hand, all right? When you want to eat food, your hand doesn't just say, all right, go for it, mouth. Right? I believe in you. You can do it. It's not going to do anything, right? Until the hand begins to work with the mouth, the body's not being used correctly. And you can say to someone all you want over a text message. And I was just talking to a brother the other day. He said, I was looking for somebody to call me, and it was about something important, and they shot me a text message. And you could tell he was disappointed. He was disappointed by that. How many of you guys, how many of you parents who are living away from your child have gotten a text message instead of a phone call on your birthday? Or vice versa? Would you prefer, a phone call or a text message? Phone call, right? We want those relationships. But we grow addicted to the things that the screen give us because they trigger dopamine in our brains, and we figure that that's just the best way to do it. Because we have the relationship with this, not with our dad, not with our brother, not with our sister. The second step to the solution is ask God for help. And I mean that quite seriously. Ask God for help. Growing up, when I was addicted to different things in the world, it wasn't until I hit rock bottom and I turned everything over to God that He healed me from my addictions. Dave, I know, tells the story about how he was addicted to cigarettes and he turned it over to God, and God healed him from his addiction to cigarettes. Listen, folks, you might not think it's serious, but I'm telling you it is. And if you've acknowledged it, then you need to acknowledge it before God as well. Jeremiah 29:12-14 tells us, Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me, and when you search for me with all your heart, I will be found by you, says the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity. And I thought that is the perfect verse to describe how we can be brought back from the captivity of some of our addictions. And perhaps you don't have a screen addiction, but you have another one. These solutions work just the same. God can bring you back to that captivity, but you must seek Him with all your heart. The rest of the steps are fairly straightforward. Number one, you have to exhibit self-control and limit your screen time. All right? I know that various members of this congregation, they put their phones down when they go into their homes, and they leave it in a place where they're not going to be checking it every 5 minutes or 150 times a day. That's a good idea. It's a good idea. And when you begin to limit your screen time, that means actually limit your screen time. You can go, if you have an iPhone or if you have an Android, you can Google, look up apps that tell you about how much time you're spending on your phone. You'll be shocked. You'll be shocked to see that you've had your phone on for 8 hours in a single day. All right? How many of you guys have to recharge your phone sometime during the day? Right? Sorry, I didn't want you to raise your hands again. All right? If you have to recharge your phone in every given day, that means you've probably exceeded 5 hours of screen just being on time. All right? James 4:8 says, "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you." It's a classic repentance solution to anything. If you turn away from it and you ask God for help, He will give you that deliverance. In your home, you should begin to create screen-free areas like the dinner table or a bed. Take the time to put these devices away from. I'm talking to myself here, just so you guys know. It's difficult. It's difficult to overcome an addiction to cocaine. It is. It's difficult to overcome an addiction to alcohol. It's going to be difficult if you're addicted to your cell phone, if you're addicted to the time you spend on social media. All right? There's resources out there like familiesmanagingmedia.com, which allow you the ability to create plans for you and your family about how much time that you should be spending on it, based on how much time you work, based on where your kids, whether or not they go to school, all that. It's a great resource. And finally, stop worrying so much about your social media friends, because they're not your friends. Listen, I'm going to say, if you feel like you've got to warn everybody about the impending virus that has been released through Steve Jobs coming back from the dead, and he's got a, whatever it is, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm being honest. Don't worry about sending people those things that say, if you love me, if you love me, then tell me you love me, and send one back and send this on to someone else. That's not how we should love each other. Don't tell someone they're beautiful over Facebook Messenger or over text. Call them and tell them, I think you're beautiful. It'll make a bigger difference. Pay attention when you're sharing, you're liking, and you're commenting on things. This is your testimony you're talking about. I'll share with you an embarrassing story from this morning. I saw that multiple friends of mine had posted a video of Guam, which is where I'm from, and I saw the first 3 seconds of the video, and there's this beautiful flyover of the island and the ocean and turtles, and I was like, that looks good. I'm going to share that. I shared it out and went and took a shower, and I came back and I pulled up my phone and I saw the rest of the clip, and there were some, let's just say, not holiness dressed swimmers in that video, right? I took it off, but I wasn't being careful. I wasn't paying attention. Sometimes we share funny things from pages that use expletives as their names, right? It might be something funny, but we don't realize that we're sharing something from, I'm effing stressed all day, and that might be the name of the page, but they share something that's clean. Don't worry about that. You guys what I'm saying? When you get to heaven, nobody's going to care how many likes you got. All right? When you're standing there at the judgment throne, God's not going to say, all right, I see you shared this picture of Jesus 47 times. Come on in. You refuse to. That's not what the book of life doesn't have an internet access. All right? It's not important. What's important are the relationships with the people you see sitting by you. What's important are the relationships with the people who you have the ability to call, right? The ability to call. The telephone has been ranked as it's like the 8th most used app now on cell phones. That ought not be so. Take the time to call people. Take the time to pray for one another. Don't send them a text message or a meme that says, praying for you. Pray for them. All right? Remember that when we are called apart and we are called into a relationship with God, that relationship not is just with Him directly, but with His saints and with the people He's put in our lives. God never ordained for you to have a relationship with Facebook, with Instagram, with Pinterest, with text messaging. He wants you to have a relationship with each other. And when we think about self-control and being sober-minded, break that dopamine addiction, and you'll find out that there's a lot more to life that we can experience. Amen? So, we've covered love, we've covered self-control, and I believe I'm speaking next week. We're going to cover my least favorite subject. We're going to talk about humility. Does anybody have any questions about anything that I went over? Anybody have any comments? Anything they'd like to share?
I just wanted to say that I go to school online, and sometimes we have a digital textbook, sometimes we have a hard copy, and I realize I get better grades, it's easier to study when I have a hard copy than I do a digital copy.
Right, it's because you're not destroying your eyeballs while you're reading a book. You're not literally pounding them with radiation. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share? Does this make sense? Is this all right? All right. Well, I'm going to ask you all to turn in your cell phones on your way out and go on a cell phone fast for the rest of the week. No. Just think about it. All right, praise God. That's all I got. If we'd like to stand. Oh, Dave. Saturday Night Alive, 6 p.m. Ta-ra. Cool, we got that. Devoted people, not devoted people. If you're in the devoted, which is the young married or the married group, this is going way south. Please come up front. You know who you are. Anyone else? Announcements? Wes?